A husky pulled his owner toward something half buried in the sand. When they got closer, they realized it wasn't driftwood, it was a man, a Navy SEAL, barely breathing. This is the story of a morning beach walk that turned them into a life-or-death rescue. A story about a dog who refused to listen, an owner who almost turned away, and a warrior who had given up hope. What happened in the next 72 hours would challenge everything we think we know about loyalty, instinct, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. This isn't just another feel-good dog story. This is about survival. But before we get ahead, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Marcus Chen had owned Apollo for 3 years. The Siberian Husky was stubborn, independent, and had a mind of his own. Most mornings, their beach walks were a battle of wills. Apollo would pull toward every interesting smell, every piece of seaweed, every crab scuttling across the sand. Marcus had learned to just let him explore. It was easier than fighting a 60-pound dog with the determination of a freight train. But that Tuesday morning in September was different. Apollo wasn't just pulling. He was frantic. His usual playful tugs had turned into something urgent, almost desperate. Marcus had never seen him like this. The dog's ears were pinned back, his body low to the ground, moving with purpose rather than curiosity. They were on a stretch of beach near Coronado, California. The area was usually quiet this early. 6 in the morning meant Marcus had the sand mostly to himself. A few joggers in the distance, some surfers checking the waves. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would explain why Apollo was acting like he'd caught the scent of something critical. Marcus tried calling him back. Apollo ignored him completely. The husky was moving fast now, his paws kicking up sand, heading toward a cluster of rocks near the waterline. Marcus jogged to keep up, getting annoyed. He had a meeting at 8. He didn't have time for whatever adventure Apollo had invented this morning. That's when he saw it. What looked like a pile of dark clothing wedged between 2 large rocks. Except clothing doesn't have hands. Clothing doesn't have blood soaking through fabric that was once tan, but now looked rust-colored in the early morning light. Marcus's stomach dropped. He pulled out his phone, already dialing 911 as he ran toward the figure. Apollo was there first, circling the man, whining in a way Marcus had never heard before. It was a sound of distress, recognition, like the dog understood something terrible had happened here. The man was face down in the sand, partially covered by debris from high tide. Marcus could see military-style pants, boots that looked tactical, and a torn shirt that revealed massive bruising across the man's back and shoulders. There was blood, a lot of it. Some dried, some still wet. The sand around him was dark with it. Marcus dropped to his knees and carefully turned the man's head to the side, checking for breathing. Shallow, barely there, but present. The man's lips were cracked and covered in dried salt. His skin was cold despite the morning sun starting to warm the beach. Marcus could see now that this wasn't just any serviceman. The tattoo on the man's forearm, the trident. This was a Navy SEAL. The 911 operator was asking questions. Marcus was trying to answer while also checking for a pulse, looking for major wounds, trying to remember the CPR training he'd taken years ago. Apollo hadn't moved. The husky was lying down right next to the SEAL's head, his body pressed against the man's face like he was trying to share warmth or keep him conscious, or both. Marcus told the operator their location, described what he was seeing. The operator told him paramedics were 7 minutes out. 7 minutes. Marcus looked at the man's face. Mid-30s maybe. Strong features despite being battered and swollen. This guy had survived something catastrophic. But 7 minutes might be 6 minutes too long. That's when Apollo did something that Marcus still can't fully explain. The husky stood up, positioned himself right next to the SEAL's face, and began licking the man's cheeks and forehead. Not playfully, deliberately, like he was trying to wake him up. Marcus had read somewhere that Dog saliva had antibacterial properties, but this felt different. This felt intentional, in a way that went beyond instinct. The seal's eyes fluttered, just barely. A small movement of his fingers. He was trying to respond to the dog. Marcus leaned in close. The man's lips were moving. He was trying to say something. Marcus put his ear right next to the seal's mouth. One word, barely a whisper. Ambush, then nothing. The man went still again, but that one word changed everything. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a training exercise gone wrong. Something had happened to this seal, something deliberate, something that had left him for dead on a California beach. Marcus looked up and down the coastline. Suddenly the empty beach felt exposed, dangerous. If someone had done this to a Navy SEAL, what would they do to a witness? He pulled Apollo closer, one hand on his phone, the other on his dog. In the distance he could hear sirens, but they felt very far away. The paramedics arrived with the kind of controlled urgency that comes from years of seeing terrible things. 4 of them moving fast, asking Marcus rapid-fire questions while simultaneously checking the SEAL's vitals and preparing him for transport. One of them recognized the trident tattoo immediately. That changed the energy. One of the EMTs made a phone call that wasn't going through normal dispatch. Marcus heard fragments. Naval Special Warfare and possible hostile action, and notify command immediately. Apollo refused to leave the SEAL's side. When the paramedics tried to move him away, the Husky planted himself and wouldn't budge. One of the EMTs, a woman with kind eyes and quick hands, looked at Marcus. "Your dog probably saved his life." The licking kept him from going deeper into shock. Body heat, too. "If he'd been alone out here another hour, we'd be having a different conversation." They loaded the SEAL into the ambulance. As they lifted the stretcher, the man's eyes opened slightly. He looked directly at Apollo. His hand moved, just inches, like he was trying to reach for the dog. Then he was gone, doors closing, sirens starting up again. The whole thing had taken maybe 12 minutes from Marcus's first call. A police officer stayed behind to take Marcus's statement. He explained finding the SEAL, the condition he was in, the single word he'd managed to say. The officer wrote everything down, but his expression was carefully neutral. He gave Marcus a card and told him someone would be in touch. Then he strongly suggested that Marcus not talk to anyone about what he'd found. Not friends, not social media. Nobody. For the SEAL's safety and his own. Marcus walked home with Apollo in a daze. The dog was calm now, but kept looking back toward the beach, like he knew his job wasn't finished yet. When they got back to Marcus's apartment, Apollo went straight to his bed and lay down, but his eyes stayed open, alert, watching the door. 3 hours later there was a knock. Marcus looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in civilian clothes, but with a bearing that screamed military. He opened the door. They showed identification. Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS. They wanted to talk about what he'd found, and they wanted to know more about his dog. The agents' names were Dawson and Park. Dawson was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent time in the field. Park was younger, intense, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything in Marcus's apartment in seconds. They sat in his living room and asked him to go through everything again, every detail, what time, exact location, the SEAL's condition, what he'd said, how Apollo had behaved. When Marcus got to the part about Apollo finding the SEAL, refusing to leave, the licking and warming behavior, the agents exchanged a look. Park pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus a photo. "Is this the man you found?" Marcus looked at the image. Same face, but healthy, strong. The man was in uniform, standing with his team, looking exactly like what he was. A warrior. "Yes, that's him." Dawson leaned forward. "His name is Lieutenant Daniel Rourke. He's been missing for 18 hours. His team was conducting a training exercise 20 miles up the coast. He disappeared during a night navigation drill. We've had search and rescue teams combing the area since 0300. You found him 7 miles from where he went missing." Marcus tried to process that. 7 miles. In his condition. How had he even moved? What happened to him? The agents didn't answer directly. Instead, Park asked, "You said he spoke to you. He said, 'ambush.' You're certain that was the word?" "I'm certain." "Did he say anything else? Any other sounds, words, anything?" Marcus shook his head. "Just that one word. Then he stopped responding." Dawson stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. "Lieutenant Rourke is currently in surgery at Naval Medical Center, San Diego. He's got 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe dehydration, signs of strangulation, and what looks like defensive wounds on his hands and arms. The medical team says if he'd been out there another 2 hours, they couldn't have saved him." Park closed his tablet. "Mr. Chen, we need to ask you something unusual. Would you be willing to bring your dog to the hospital? Lieutenant Rourke has been in and out of consciousness, but every time he wakes up, he keeps asking about a dog. He says a husky stayed with him, kept him warm. We think seeing Apollo might help him remember what happened." Marcus looked at Apollo. The husky's ears were up, alert, like he understood what was being discussed. "Of course. When?" "Now, if possible." They drove to the hospital in an unmarked SUV. Dawson drove while Park sat in back with Marcus and Apollo. The dog was perfectly calm, looking out the window like this was a normal car ride. Park kept watching the husky with obvious curiosity. "I've been doing this job for 11 years, Park said. "I've seen search and rescue dogs, bomb dogs, patrol dogs, all trained professionals. But what your dog did this morning, that's not training, that's something else." Marcus scratched behind Apollo's ears. "He's always been intuitive, knows when I'm stressed or sick. But this was different. He was determined, like he knew exactly what he needed to do." "Huskies aren't typically known for that kind of work," Park continued. "They're independent, stubborn, more likely to run off than to stick around and help. No offense to your dog." "None taken. He is stubborn, but he's also loyal in his own way. And he's always had this thing where he seems to understand when something is really wrong, not just inconvenient, wrong." They pulled into the hospital's secure entrance. Military police at the gate checked their credentials and waved them through. Inside, the hospital had that antiseptic smell that all medical facilities have, mixed with something else. Tension. There were more armed personnel here than Marcus expected. They weren't taking any chances with Rourke's security. A doctor met them on the 4th floor. Commander Hayes, according to her name tag. Naval surgeon. She looked exhausted. "He's stable, but critical. We've repaired the lung damage and set the ribs. The strangulation did some damage to his trachea, but he'll recover. The bigger concern is what he's been saying." "What has he been saying?" Dawson asked. Hayes led them down the hallway, away from Rourke's room. "He keeps insisting it wasn't an accident, that someone tried to kill him, that it was planned. But he's on a lot of pain medication, and head trauma can cause confusion. We're not sure how reliable his memories are right now." Park's expression hardened. "With all due respect, Commander, this man is a Navy SEAL. They're trained to maintain clarity under extreme duress. If he says it was intentional, we need to take that seriously." They stopped outside a hospital room with 2 armed guards. Inside, through the window, Marcus could see Lieutenant Rourke. He was hooked up to multiple machines, his face swollen and bruised, but his eyes were open. And he was agitated, trying to sit up. A nurse was attempting to keep him calm. "He's been like that for 20 minutes, Hayes said. "Keeps asking about the dog. We thought he was hallucinating, but then your office called." Dawson looked at Marcus. "Let's see if Apollo can help." They brought the husky into the room. The moment Rourke saw Apollo, his entire body relaxed. The tension drained out of his face. He stopped struggling against the nurse. His hand reached out, and Apollo walked right up to the bed, placing his head under Rourke's palm. The SEAL's eyes filled with tears. "You're real? I thought I dreamed you." His voice was rough, damaged from the throat trauma, but the relief in it was unmistakable. Apollo stayed perfectly still, letting Rourke pet him, the husky's tail wagging slowly. Marcus had never seen his dog this gentle, this calm around a stranger. Rourke looked at Marcus. "He saved my life. I was going under. I couldn't stay awake. Then he was there, licking my face. I could feel his warmth. I knew if I could just hold on a little longer, someone would find me." Park moved closer to the bed. "Lieutenant Rourke, I'm Special Agent Park, NCIS. Can you tell us what happened? You disappeared during a training exercise. Your team has been looking for you." Rourke's expression changed. The relief was replaced by something darker. Anger. It wasn't the exercise. Someone on the team. They waited until we were separated, hit me from behind. When I woke up, I was in the water. They'd weighted me down, left me to drown. The room went silent except for the beeping of the monitors. Hayes looked shocked. Dawson and Park were suddenly all business, their attention laser-focused on Rourke. "You're saying a member of your team tried to kill you?" Dawson's voice was carefully controlled. "I know how it sounds, but I saw him. Before I blacked out, I saw his face." "Who?" Rourke's hand tightened in Apollo's fur. The dog didn't move, just stayed there, solid and present. "Petty Officer Jordan Hale. He's been on the team for 6 months. He hit me with something. I felt my ribs break. Then he dragged me into the water. I was weighted down with chains, padlocked." Park leaned in. "How did you get free?" "The lock was cheap. I don't think he expected me to stay conscious. I worked it against the rocks until it broke. Took me maybe an hour, but I was already hypothermic, disoriented. The current pulled me south. I tried to swim for shore, but I kept going under. I don't remember most of it. I remember making it to the beach. I remember thinking this was it. Then I remember warmth, fur, this dog." He looked at Apollo again. The husky licked his hand. Rourke's eyes closed for a moment. "I thought he was a hallucination, guardian angel or something, but he was real. He kept me alive until help came." Dawson was already on his phone, walking out of the room, talking in low, urgent tones. Park stayed, pulling out a notepad. "Lieutenant, I need you to tell me everything you remember about Petty Officer Hale, every interaction, anything unusual, anything that might explain why he'd do this." For the next 30 minutes, Rourke talked. Marcus stayed with Apollo, listening to a story that sounded like it belonged in a thriller movie, not real life. Hale had joined the team with excellent credentials. He was skilled, competent, passed all the psychological evaluations. But Rourke had noticed small things. The way Hale talked about civilian casualties and past operations, too comfortable with it, almost enthusiastic. The way he collected personal information about team members, where they lived, who their families were. At the time, Rourke had thought maybe Hale was just socially awkward, trying too hard to bond with the team. Then, 3 weeks ago, Rourke had been reviewing some old operation reports. He'd noticed discrepancies in Hale's background check, small things, dates that didn't quite line up, a previous address that didn't exist. He'd started asking questions quietly, doing his own digging. He'd found enough to make him suspicious, enough to plan to bring it to his commanding officer after this training exercise. "He must have known," Rourke said, his voice getting weaker. The pain medication was kicking in. "Must have known I was looking into him. That's why he made his move." Hayes stepped in. "That's enough for now. He needs to rest." Park nodded, but his expression was grim. As they left the room, Apollo hesitated. The husky looked back at Rourke, then at Marcus, like he didn't want to leave the injured SEAL alone. Marcus had to gently pull him away. Outside in the hallway, Dawson was finishing his call. When he hung up, he looked at Park. "Hale is gone, never returned from the exercise. His gear was found abandoned on the beach. No sign of him." "He knew Rourke survived," Park said. "He's running." The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Marcus gave multiple statements to NCIS. His apartment became a temporary command post, with agents coming and going, asking more questions about Apollo's behavior. the exact location of the rescue, anything that might help them understand Hale's plan or where he might have gone. But something else was happening. Apollo was changing. The husky who usually spent his days lounging around, begging for treats, and occasionally destroying shoes when he got bored, had become intensely focused. He stayed by the door, watched the windows. When Marcus tried to take him for their normal walks, Apollo would pull toward the hospital, every time, like he knew Rourke was there and needed to check on him. On the third day, Hayes called Marcus. "Lieutenant Rourke is asking for Apollo. I know this is unusual, but the psychological impact of seeing your dog has been significant. He's healing faster than expected, more cooperative with physical therapy. Would you consider bringing Apollo back for another visit?" Marcus agreed immediately. Apollo seemed to sense where they were going the moment they got in the car. The dog sat perfectly still during the drive, his eyes focused forward, tail wagging slightly. Rourke was sitting up when they arrived. His color was better. The swelling in his face had gone down. He smiled when Apollo walked in, and the husky went straight to him, resting his head on the bed rail. "I've been thinking about something," Rourke said after a few minutes of quietly petting Apollo, "about how he found me. That stretch of beach where I washed up. It's not on any normal walking route. The tide was wrong. The current shouldn't have pushed me there. And the timing. You said you usually walk at 6? Marcus nodded. "Every morning, same time. I made it to shore around 5:30. I know because I could still see the lighthouse beacon timing. If your dog hadn't insisted on that exact path at that exact time, I'd be dead." "What are you saying?" Rourke looked at Apollo with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Respect? Wonder? Something deeper. "I'm saying that in my line of work, we're trained to recognize when something is more than coincidence. When a mission succeeds because of preparation and skill versus when it succeeds because of something you can't explain. This was the second kind." There was a knock at the door. Park and Dawson entered, and their expressions were serious. "We have a situation," Dawson said. "We've been tracking Hale's movements. Financial records show he purchased supplies consistent with long-term wilderness survival, camping gear, weapons. He's not fleeing the country. He's staying local." Rourke sat up straighter, wincing from the rib pain. "He's got unfinished business." "That's our assessment. We think he knows you survived, and we think he might try again." Park turned to Marcus. "Which means you could be in danger too. You're a witness. You can place the victim at a specific location at a specific time. That's valuable evidence in the case we're building." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "You're saying he might come after me?" "We're saying we need to take precautions. We're offering protective custody until we locate Hale." Marcus looked at Apollo. The husky's ears were up, alert, like he understood the threat. "What about my dog?" "He'll come with you. We're setting up a safe house in—" Apollo's head snapped toward the window. A low growl started in his throat, not the playful growl he used during tug-of-war. This was different. Warning, threat. Everyone in the room froze. Dawson moved to the window, staying to the side, looking out carefully. "4th floor. What could he possibly—" The window exploded inward, not shattered. Exploded, like something had hit it with massive force. Everyone dropped to the ground. Rourke rolled out of bed despite his injuries, Hayes covering him with her body. Park had his weapon drawn, moving toward the window, but Apollo was faster. The husky launched himself toward the window, barking furiously. Not scared, aggressive, protective. Marcus crawled toward him, trying to pull him back, terrified the dog would jump through the broken window. Then he saw it. A drone. Small, black, hovering just outside the shattered window, and attached to it was something that looked very much like an explosive device. Park fired twice. The drone jerked sideways, one of its rotors damaged, but it didn't fall. It was retreating, struggling, but still airborne, heading toward the roof of an adjacent building. Dawson was already on his radio, calling for backup, lockdown, evacuation. Apollo was still barking, straining toward the window. Marcus held him tight. The husky had seen the drone before anyone else, had reacted before the window broke. How? How had he known? The hospital went into full emergency protocol. Armed personnel flooded the floor. Rourke was moved to a secure location deeper in the building. Marcus, Apollo, and the NCIS agents were escorted to a conference room while the bomb squad dealt with the shattered window and checked for any other devices. Park was on multiple phones, coordinating with local police, base security, FBI. Dawson sat with Marcus and Rourke, who'd refused to stay in bed and had convinced the medical staff to let him stay mobile as long as he took it easy. "That was Hale," Rourke said. His voice was certain. "He's military trained. He knows drone operation. He was trying to finish what he started." "But how did he know which room you were in?" Marcus asked. "Hospital records can be hacked, or he could have followed the NCIS vehicles, or a dozen other ways. The man is a trained special operator. Surveillance is basic skill set." Apollo had calmed down, but was still on high alert, positioned between Marcus and the door. Watching, always watching. Rourke kept looking at the dog with that same expression, like he was seeing something nobody else could. "Your dog knew," Rourke said quietly. "He detected that drone before any of us, before our trained federal agents, before the security systems. How?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't know. Huskies have good hearing, but that seems beyond normal," Rourke finished. "Yeah, it does." 2 hours later, they had a plan. Hale was clearly still in the area and willing to take extreme risks to eliminate Rourke and any witnesses. The safe house was no longer safe if Hale had the capability to track their movements. They needed a different approach. Dawson laid it out. "We use Lieutenant Rourke as bait, move him to a new location, make it look routine, medical transfer. But we control every variable, every route, every person. We force Hale to make a move in an environment we control." "You want to dangle me in front of a trained killer," Rourke said. He didn't sound upset. He sounded eager. "With extensive backup and surveillance, yes." Rourke looked at Marcus and Apollo. "I want them there." Everyone turned to stare at him. Park spoke first. "That's not protocol. Civilians don't participate in—" "That dog has saved my life twice now. Detected threats before our technology did. I want him there." Rourke's tone left no room for argument. Dawson looked uncomfortable. "We can't order a civilian to participate in a law enforcement operation." "You're not ordering," Marcus heard himself say. "I'm volunteering." "Mr. Chen, Apollo found him. Apollo warned us about the drone. If this Hale guy is as dangerous as you say, maybe having Apollo there gives you an advantage." Marcus wasn't sure where this courage was coming from. He was terrified, but looking at Apollo, at how the dog had transformed from a goofy pet into something fierce and protective, he knew they needed to see this through. They spent the rest of the day planning. The transfer would happen tomorrow at dawn. Rourke would be moved from Naval Medical Center to a private facility in the mountains, supposedly for additional treatment and protection. The route would take them through an area with limited cell service and few civilians. Perfect place for an ambush. Perfect place to control all the variables. Marcus went home that night with a security detail, 2 agents stationed outside his apartment. Apollo was restless, pacing from room to room. Marcus barely slept. He kept thinking about what they were walking into, about how a normal Tuesday morning beach walk had turned into something out of an action movie. At 4 a.m, there was a soft knock at his door. Marcus looked through the peephole. Lieutenant Rourke in civilian clothes with one of the agents behind him. Marcus opened the door. "Should you be out of the hospital?" Rourke looked tired but determined. "Signed myself out against medical advice. I'm not letting my team walk into danger while I'm lying in a hospital bed." He looked at Apollo. "Can I come in? I wanted to talk to you both before tomorrow." They sat in Marcus's living room. Apollo immediately went to Rourke, pressing against his legs. The SEAL ran his hands through the husky's fur, and Marcus could see some of the tension leave his body. "I've been in combat zones, bad situations, lost team members. But what happened on that beach, waiting to die? That was different. You lose hope in a way that's hard to describe. Your mind starts shutting down. You stop fighting, and then this dog appeared, like he was sent, like someone knew I needed help, and sent the exact right help at the exact right time. Rourke looked up at Marcus. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I think Apollo was meant to find me, and I think tomorrow, whatever happens, he's meant to be there too. Dawn came cold and gray. The convoy left Naval Medical Center at exactly 0600, 3 vehicles, unmarked but armored. Rourke was in the middle vehicle with Dawson and a medical corpsman. Marcus and Apollo were in the lead vehicle with Park and another agent. The trailing vehicle was full of tactical operators, heavily armed and ready. They drove north following the planned route, through San Diego suburbs, onto the highway, then onto smaller roads heading into the mountains. The landscape changed from urban to rural. More trees, fewer buildings, exactly where you'd stage an ambush if you were a trained operator. Apollo was tense. Marcus could feel it. The dog was staring out the window, body coiled. Park noticed, too. He spoke quietly into his radio. Dog is agitated. Possible proximity alert. They rounded a curve. The road ahead narrowed. Trees close on both sides. Textbook ambush point. Park's hand moved to his weapon. Eyes open, everyone. Apollo's growl started low. Then he barked. Once. Sharp. Urgent. The agent driving hit the brakes, not because of the bark, because a tree had fallen across the road, perfectly placed, too perfect. It's a trap, Park said into his radio. All units, combat positions. The vehicle stopped. Doors opened. Armed personnel deployed. Marcus pulled Apollo low, trying to keep him safe in the vehicle's footwell. But the Husky was straining toward something, pulling toward the forest on the left side of the road. Then Marcus heard it, a sound like compressed air. Something flew from the trees toward the middle vehicle, Rourke's vehicle, a projectile. Apollo lunged. Marcus lost his grip on the leash. The Husky was out of the vehicle, running full speed toward the projectile's trajectory. Marcus screamed his name, but the dog didn't stop. The tactical team was engaging, gunfire in the forest. Park was running toward Rourke's vehicle. Everything was chaos and noise, and Marcus couldn't see Apollo anymore. Then an explosion. Not massive, but significant. Smoke and fire in the middle of the road, but not where the projectile was headed. Further left, in the forest, where Apollo had run. Marcus was out of the vehicle, running before anyone could stop him, into the trees toward the smoke. He could hear shouting behind him, agents yelling at him to get back. He didn't care. He found Apollo 30 feet into the forest. The Husky was standing over something. Someone. Petty Officer Jordan Hale. The man was on the ground, his weapon a few feet away, and he was bleeding from his leg. Apollo had him pinned, teeth bared, not attacking, but absolutely preventing any movement. Hale looked up at Marcus with wild eyes. The dog came out of nowhere. I was lining up the shot and he just appeared. Knocked me down. The launcher misfired. Tactical operators swarmed the area seconds later. They secured Hale, checked him for other weapons, called for medical. The man had a broken ankle and a nasty bite wound on his arm. Apollo had taken him down like a trained military working dog. Except Apollo had no training, just instinct, just the absolute certainty that this man was a threat. Park appeared, breathing hard from running. He looked at Apollo, at Hale on the ground, at Marcus standing there in shock. Your dog just saved multiple federal agents and a Navy SEAL, again. Back at the vehicles, Rourke was unharmed. The projectile had indeed misfired. If Hale had gotten his shot off, the armor on the vehicle might not have been enough. But Apollo had disrupted the attack before it fully developed. They returned to San Diego with Hale in custody. Medical teams checked everyone over. Apollo got a full veterinary examination and was pronounced completely healthy. The Husky had somehow come through the entire incident without a scratch. Over the next week, the full story came out. Hale wasn't his real name. He was connected to a criminal organization that had infiltrated multiple military units, gathering intelligence, occasionally arranging accidents for personnel who got too close to their operations. Rourke had stumbled onto evidence of their network. Hale had been tasked with eliminating him and anyone who could connect them. The evidence Marcus had provided, combined with Apollo's interruption of the ambush and Hale's capture, gave federal prosecutors everything they needed. The entire network started collapsing as people rolled on each other to cut deals. 2 months later, there was a small ceremony at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Marcus didn't want attention, but Rourke had insisted. Apollo was formally recognized by Naval Special Warfare Command for his actions. They didn't give him a medal because he wasn't military, but they gave him something else. Commander Hayes read the citation. For exceptional courage and intuitive action, resulting in the preservation of life and the disruption of hostile operations, Apollo the Husky is hereby recognized as an honorary member of the Naval Special Warfare Community. Apollo sat perfectly still during the ceremony, like he understood the importance. Rourke was there in full dress uniform, fully healed. He knelt down and looked Apollo in the eyes. "You saved my life twice, buddy. I don't know how. I don't know why. But I'll never forget it." The Husky licked his face, tail wagging. Some things didn't need explanation,